Alright, in this video I want to talk about hair loss. More specifically, I want to talk about 3 common myths about hair loss, and yeah, watch the entire video if you don't want to go from this to this. So first one is the myth that washing your hair daily with shampoo is going to cause hair loss. This is a myth that is being propagated by people like Self-Maxer. However, the data shows the exact opposite. Here's the study, here's the reference if you want to check it out. Basically, they had 2 types of study designs. One of them was an epidemiological study. The other one was a controlled study. There was no correlation between shampooing your hair more often and more hair loss. If anything, they saw actually the opposite. So basically, when it comes to these metrics like dandruff, itchiness, dryness, they actually decreased the more people washed their hair, which is probably the opposite of what you would expect, because a lot of people on the internet are claiming that shampoo rinses away the scalp oil so it dries out your scalp and hair. Well, actually, they tracked the before and afters, and there was a correlation between washing your hair more often and actually having less dryness, which is pretty interesting to me because people assume that it's the opposite. And in this graph that was from the same study, you can see that hair strength and hair loss were actually better on the daily group compared to the one that showered once or less per week. So washing your hair daily is actually better for dryness, for dandruff, for itchiness, for hair strength, and also for hair loss, which is pretty counterintuitive if you consume advice from the internet. Here are more graphs. In this one, washing frequency was correlated positively with the number of good hair days. So washing your hair infrequently was actually bad for the aesthetics and appearance of your hair. And in this graph, it was scalp flaking. There was actually a higher prevalence in the group that didn't wash their hair frequently, and the group with the better outcomes were the ones that actually washed their hair daily. And also, there are other factors. For example, as you can see, washing your hair daily actually decreases oxidized lipids in your scalp, which are actually pro-inflammatory, and inflammation can actually increase hair loss via indirect pathways. It makes your hair more susceptible to hair loss, even if DHT is a primary driver. Another pathway is the scalp oils. They accumulate DHT. So if you don't wash it regularly, you're going to have your hair follicles exposed to even more DHT compared to washing your hair daily. So again, it increases hair loss via multiple pathways. One of them is you're going to have more oxidized lipids in your scalp, which is pro-inflammatory, and localized inflammation can overactivate the 5 alpha reductase enzymes, as well as the scalp oils can accumulate more DHT, meaning that your hair follicles will be exposed to more DHT, so they will be miniaturizing faster. But yeah, by every metric, washing hair daily was better than washing it infrequently, which is what people like Self-Maxer recommend. And this is with shampoo, of course. So using shampoo daily basically prevents the accumulation of DHT in the scalp oils. It prevents the accumulation of pro-inflammatory compounds, so it cleans out pollution. It cleans out lipids before they oxidize. There are multiple benefits. People think that it's just about hygiene, not about health or hair loss, but it's actually about those 3. And by the way, if you want to optimize your health and looks, if you want to see everything I do when it comes to hair loss, which is quite a lot, you can join my school community. It's the first link in the pinned comment. And yeah, there I share everything I do for diet, supplements, hair loss, gym, physique, and even more stuff. So if you're curious, you can check the link in the pinned comment. And yeah, I hope you join. So the second myth is wearing hats daily causes hair loss. So there's this idea that hats can cause traction alopecia, so they accelerate hair loss, for example. I mean, I guess that could be true if it's like really, really tight, but I don't think that's the case for most people. In this study, it showed the exact opposite. It was actually a twin study. So the confounding variable of genetics was equalized. And in this twin study, it was actually an inverse association between using hats and actually losing hair. So the twins that wore hats daily, they actually had less hair loss. And so one of the theories is wearing a hat can protect your hair from the UV rays, which decreases scalp inflammation, therefore making the hair follicles more resilient to hair loss. Another theory is, and it could be both at the same time, but another one is it basically prevents pollution, so pollutant compounds to accumulate on your scalp, which can also trigger scalp inflammation and make the hair follicles less resilient to hair loss. Basically, maybe it's those at the same time, maybe it's more. The fact of the matter is, wearing a hat daily was actually correlated with less hair loss, which is pretty interesting because it's the opposite opinion that many people have. Myth number 3 is that hair loss only comes from your mother's side. I get comments about this sometimes where some people, they think they're fine just because one side of their family is fine, but it's not that simple. hair loss is polygenic. You cannot predict if you're going to have hair loss or not, just based on one side of the family. You get 50% from each parent. Then each of your grandparents is 25% of the variance, which means that your dad's hair loss is actually a stronger predictor of your own hair loss than your grandpa from your mother's side. Again, this theory doesn't hold true in the scientific literature, since hair loss is a polygenic problem, and it's not as simple as one gene that predicts it. It's actually hundreds of different genes from both parents. So you cannot predict just based on one ancestor. You cannot predict which genes are going to be triggered. You cannot predict genetic recombination. It's unpredictable. You don't know if you're going to have hair loss or not. Of course, if your dad has hair loss or your grandparents, that's a predictor, but that's still only a game of probability. It's still unpredictable. So because of how complex hair loss is when it comes to its polygenetic properties, you simply cannot predict it. So it's probably better to anticipate it rather than cure it later on. And yeah, those were 3 myths. And again, if you want to join the Skool community, where I show everything I do for hair loss, according to the best available evidence, according to the systematic reviews, randomized control trials, etc., you can click the link in the pinned comment, and perhaps it can save you time and money, because you're not going to be wasting your own time and your own money on products that don't actually work. Because everything I share in the community are products that have been proven to work, and my routine is quite complex. My goal isn't just to stop hair loss, it's actually to reverse it as well, based on all the available evidence. So again, if you're curious, you can click the link in the pinned comment. And yeah, if you're disappointed, if you don't like it, you can get your money back anyway. So all the risk is on me. But yeah, join the Skool community, and thanks for watching.